We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey.
Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your co-host, Austra Putnina, and today we're shifting gears a bit and I'll be interviewing you. Partly because it's your 100th episode, which we will touch on in a bit. And we discussed that it would be valuable for us to talk a bit more about you, get people some insights in your story a bit more. Which anybody listening, you can always go back to first episode where Lisa shared more of her story with her dear friend Liz. And before we get into your story, how do you feel about having 100 episodes?
It's so, on one hand, it feels like it's 100 episodes, and on another, it doesn't. It has flown by, but it has been absolutely amazing and remarkable. I have met so many cool people who are like-minded, who just really want to help, people who have had their own suffering, deep suffering, and turned it around, and not only are healing themselves, but helping others, which I just find amazing. The knowledge I've gained about trauma has been sometimes overwhelming. I'll be honest. It's sometimes overwhelming, but it's also been enlightening because, they talk about knowledge is power. And in all my research, this particular topic came up a lot, and that is, learning and understanding about your trauma is very important to your healing journey. And I know that to be true in my life, because as I'm learning about trauma and the effects of trauma and the behavior that comes out of trauma, explains so much about my life, and has allowed me to be able to separate who I am finally from the trauma and the behaviors of the trauma, so that I can, like, for example, when I get triggered, I'm able to take a pause and I'm able to respond appropriately rather than just react. So it's really been a journey. I've learned a ton, met a lot of people. It's been great. I'm looking forward to the next 100.
Ooh, yeah.
It's only going to get better. That's what my husband says. It only gets better.
I agree. Literally every episode. And question I have for you is, what are some of the things that you have noticed have changed or shifted in you compared to you, let's say, right before episode 1 and now 100 episodes later?
Well, in talking to so many people, right, I have been able to really connect with them and resonate so much with their stories, which just, I don't know what the word is. It just confirms in me more and more that the effects of trauma and being able to manage it. But, when you're hearing other people's stories and you're hearing that they have the same thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that you had, it really helps with the self-awareness and makes you realize, okay, that's within me too. But it's also encouraging because they talk about their healing, and it's encouraging.
And then I also had a question as you were speaking about, you said that you learned and understood your trauma better. Maybe as you slightly get into your story, what are some of the things that you have noticed as you have been doing the podcast, that you have learned about your trauma and your story, or some of the dots that you have connected?
I think the biggest is, one of the biggest is really understanding my triggers. What triggers me, when I'm triggered, and how to manage the trigger. And it's been really empowering. So a lot of, I guess what I've learned the most is my behavior and being able to separate me from that behavior, which allows me to then respond better.
And with that separation, because I feel like it's something that sounds simple,
I know.
and in some ways it is.
I mean,
Yeah.
once you get there, it's simple. Once you get there, it is simple. Yeah.
So what has helped you to get there? And maybe you can talk a bit more from perspective of where you were, or what was your like usual response to triggers compared to where you are now and how you deal with triggers now.
Before, I didn't even know that they were triggers. I didn't even know what triggers were. I didn't even, I heard the word triggers, but I didn't realize I was being triggered. And so if I didn't realize I was being triggered, I certainly didn't know what was triggering me. And now I am so aware of when I'm triggered. And so one of the things that I've learned that came to me recently is self-awareness is a superpower, because the self-awareness will help you become aware of when you're being triggered so that you can then manage it, rather than what I was doing before is I would just be triggered and I would just spout off. I would just react.
Mm.
And the problem with that is in the middle of it, you feel completely out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's over with, the guilt, the shame is overwhelming, and having to go back and clean up the mess. And the problem is people are forgiving, but they don't forget, and you're not trustworthy.
That was my next question. Because triggers is a big topic and it can affect literally all areas of life especially when you're not aware, you don't even know that you're being triggered. You don't even know.
It's
So that was the question that I had. Kind of, did you have that thought of, let's say you're now triggered, you react, and you are not aware that you're being triggered, you don't know any kind of behind the scenes about it. Did you have this thought of like something's wrong with me or something like that, and how do you deal with that at that time?
Yes. I definitely thought, because when you're in the middle of the trigger, how it felt for me before was it would consume me. It would take over. That's what it felt. It would take over. And then I'm also, as I'm being triggered and reacting, I'm watching the people that I'm reacting to, and I'm watching their reaction to me, and it's horrifying to me. And yet I can't stop this thing. And then when it's done, when I'm done spewing or whatever is happening, I didn't always spew, but reacting, let's say that, there's a sense of relief, because I don't know, it's kind of weird, but there's this moment or second of relief. And then that's when the guilt and the shame are overwhelming.
So what did you say to that Lisa or person listening who might be in that place right now, going through that or having those loops of that like pattern repeating?
Cycle, yeah.
Yeah.
It's becoming aware. You've got to work on self-awareness, and you've got to, because that is the only thing that's really going to stop it. You've got to have the self-awareness, and that means you're going to have to slow down and pay attention to, because for me, I'll tell you how it feels real quick, and maybe this will help the listeners identify it, because I didn't identify it before. When I think back on that, Lisa, like somebody could have explained it and then maybe I would have got it. But it just feels like you go from being calm to immediately upset. It's usually anger or frustration, and the thoughts go racing through your mind, and you're trying to understand it. You're feeling overwhelmed, anxiety rises up, and all you want to do is lash out. There's no calm, rational response. So that's how it feels. And so, journaling is a big deal, but the self-awareness, if you can just pay attention to how you're reacting to things. and it's really good idea to journal, because you're going to react to things and it's going to be fine and normal and okay. But then there's going to be those other ones that's going to be over the top. And as you become more and more aware of those, is when you're going to be able to feel empowered, and you're going to be able to catch them beforehand, so that you can have that pause between when you're being triggered and when you respond.
Yeah, I think that I have a good example of something that my friend said, that she had this. I think the situation was that one of her daughters, they had this like bubble thing, and it spilled over or something, and she was in bad mood, and she literally felt furious that
Yeah.
like emotions took over, and she thought she was behaving inappropriately towards her daughter, kind of telling her something or like whatever. And then she listened, or like she had a camera or something, and then she watched it back, and she was like, I actually did it. I was doing so well. You literally couldn't even see that I was furious. I was consumed by anger, or I was just like so annoyed in that moment. And I feel that's something that awareness is giving. It's giving you that chance to see yourself from the side, both good and the bad. But it's something that a lot of times we don't stop to, even as you were speaking about the self-awareness and journaling. My first thought with self-awareness also is to be curious and study yourself,
Yeah.
kind of as if you're trying to get to know a person that you don't know, because the
Right.
moment we assume that we know ourselves, that's when we kind of stop our growth. And also a question here would be like, did you get to that, because there's another follow-up question that I'm really curious about. How, like, did you, I forgot the question.
Give her a minute.
Oh my
Welcome
gosh.
to my world.
Oh, I know what's the next question. But what's the first
Well, you
one?
were talking about how your friend was able to hide her emotions from her daughter, and being able to manage it so that, right? That's what you were, I don't know if that'll trigger anything.
Oh, yeah. Question is about like, did you have this assumption about like, this is just the way I am, I can't change it, and it will forever be like this?
That's a good question. It didn't. No, that didn't cross my mind. I just would look at them and think, why are they looking at me like that? Like, but I didn't think that, no. But I knew something was off, because, you do it enough times, and you're seeing this on everybody's faces, and you're the common denominator. So you start to realize, okay, it's something here that's not.
Okay, so what made you realize that? Because that's big. Sometimes you don't even get to that conclusion because everybody else is at fault.
Oh, no, no, that was not, no. I got tired of hurting people. I,
Mm.
you know, I, and I got tired of getting that reaction from people. And I just needed I just reacted. I just would react, and I wasn't thinking before I was reacting. And what I needed to do was start thinking before I started reacting. That's really what I need to do. And with just reacting is when you do damage. And I'm not talking about major damage. I was not this awful,
Yeah.
horrible person, but it wasn't okay. And it was survival mode. That's why I did it. I mean, I'm not going to be judgmental against myself. It was survival mode, and that's how I lived. And when you're in survival mode, you're getting from 1 minute to the next. You don't have the opportunity all the time to think ahead.
And follow-up question that I had was because I feel that, and this is my assumption, that if you are in survival mode, you're not really like super open-minded about stuff. And
Nope.
my question was like, what makes you so open-minded?
I think it started, back when I was like 19, when I knew there was something wrong within me. I didn't know what it was. And I think that I was in survival mode, but I was always looking to improve myself. There just wasn't a lot out there like there is now.
Mhm.
There wasn't the workshops, there wasn't the trauma therapy. There certainly wasn't that. There was a lot of traditional therapy, but trauma therapy wasn't around really. And so, yeah,
So take us back to 19 years old Lisa.
yeah.
When you realized that something is wrong, what was it that led you to that thought? What were some of the experiences, some of the situations that you have gone through by that like 19 years old Lisa?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that before. Like, what was it? And I think I was feeling pain, but I think maybe I guess I disassociated. I don't know. I know I didn't like the way I felt inside. I know that to be true, and that's as far as I can go with it. I don't think I realized at the time, which I realize now, is it was pain. It was a lot of pain.
How
Um,
would you describe that pain, like that feeling that you had? If you now would like get back into 19-year-old Lisa's
oh, I
body,
didn't
what
like
was it that you were
myself.
feeling?
I didn't like myself, and I didn't like my behavior, and I felt like the more I tried, the more I messed up. And I didn't have a lot of guidance because that's just how my life was. And losing my mom at 16, I didn't have a lot of guidance. So, yeah, I just felt like I was just this hot mess and I didn't know anything and I was just trying to figure life out.
And with that, like you mentioned that you lost your mom at 16. What were some other events that you gone through? Because there's quite a few
Yeah,
experiences that you have had.
I know, I know. Well, and my teenage years were really the roughest. So my younger years, there was abuse as far back as I can remember, but the abuse escalated when I put weight on, which was about 11 years old. And it was because I had began emotionally eating. I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. I had, honest to God, had no idea why I was putting weight on. Plus, your hormones are changing at 11, 12 years old. And so that'll do that. That'll cause your weight to kind of pump up a little bit. But that was the thing that triggered my mom to really get vicious. And my mom was all about her looks, and she was thin and she lived on coffee and cigarettes. And so when I started putting weight on is when she started getting abusive with me and calling me out on my weight. I didn't know how I was putting weight on, and so I certainly didn't know how to take the weight off. So I would get criticized but not taught.
Guided, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, she got to the point where she said, if you don't take this weight off, I'm not buying you any school clothes and it was going to be my freshman year in high school. I'm not going to buy you any clothes. And she honestly God, stuck to her guns. And I got down to like one pair of shorts and one shirt. My dad got mad and took me out shopping. So my teenage years were rough, and it was that on and off. And then when I started high school, just after I started high school, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And, she didn't talk to me about it. It was the neighbor that came and picked me up at school to tell me about it. And she went through a lot of chemo. She took a year of chemo. It was really rough. And she seemed to be in remission for like literally just months. So when I was about 15 and a half or so, it came back, but they didn't tell me. My parents didn't tell me. And it got to the point where all of a sudden she's not going to work anymore. She's home a lot. And then I'm now helping take care of her, and including giving her shots of morphine, going to the grocery store. But in the whole time I'm thinking she's just going to get better. And I was getting upset because nobody was talking to me about it until one day I cornered my dad, and he wasn't even honest with me. He said, I don't know if she's going to get better or not, but he knew it was terminal at that point. So everybody lied to me about it, or by omission, if otherwise. And I find out that she's actually dying when she gets rushed to the hospital. And I go up to the hospital, and I'm standing outside the hospital room and the doctor is in there and walks out and says, not sure she'll make it through the night, maybe 3 days, and walks off. And that is how I found out my mom was dying of cancer. So that whole event was traumatic, of course.
So what happened in that moment when you heard that?
I wanted to hit the doctor. Honest to God, I just thought, I did not see it coming at all. Did not see it coming at all. And, you know, the family and friends were around. My dad was down getting her registered, so he wasn't there when this announcement was made. And so rather than walking up and hitting him, I turned around and walked away. And I just kept thinking, who does this happen to? Like, what just happened? My entire world just changed. Like, you're telling me my mom is dying? Last I knew, she was fine. She was getting better. As a matter of fact, she was walking around the house, which I didn't realize that that's oftentimes a sign right before they die, is they seem to be getting better. And that's exactly what she did. So you could imagine the shock here. She's now walking around. She doesn't need as many shots of morphine, to all of a sudden she's in the hospital and she's got 3 days maybe. So yeah, it was a lot.
How did you process that?
You know, I didn't. You know, I don't think I did, because I know at first, like, I didn't want to be out of her room, right? But as it got closer to her dying, I didn't want to be in the room. And I can remember after she passed, sitting at my friend's house thinking, what 16-year-old loses their mother? I didn't know anybody. So in 3 days, I find out my mom's going to die, and she dies. I didn't have time to even process it. It was just, for a long time, I just thought, whose mom dies at 16? And I stuck on that for a little bit, not very long. And then the thought I got was, okay, I guess I go back to school.
Okay, so here question, keeping audience in mind in case if there's somebody who has gone through that or maybe is going through that. What did you say to that 16-year-old Lisa?
What would I say now? What would I say now? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you weren't told the truth. I'm sorry that you're going through this right now. I don't know, I'd have to think about what else I would say to her, but actually I'm writing my letter to her and I haven't even gotten to this part yet.
Oh.
Yeah. So, you know,
I feel like I have another question with this. What do you feel she needed to hear?
Oh my gosh. She needed to be supported. She needed to be told she's sorry. She needed to have people surround her and just be there for her. I felt so alone. I felt so incredibly alone. And I felt alone in a crowd. At her funeral.
Yeah, it's like life goes on.
Yeah, exactly. At her funeral, it was a pretty big funeral, and I felt completely alone. It was
even among your family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what was it among, like, you were still among family, but what was it that made you still feel alone?
It didn't feel like anybody was really, they weren't asking me how I was doing. They weren't reaching out to me. The only thing I can remember, so she died in October of my junior year. And so the only time I remember anybody being excited or doing anything with me was for my prom in my senior year. And some of my mom's friends came over and put makeup on and helped me. And that was it. But my school counselors didn't reach out to me. And I don't expect anything from my friends. My friends were my age and, and they were there for me as much as they could be. I mean, it was something big. They couldn't manage that. But the adults in my life failed me. Family disappeared. Her friends disappeared. My dad completely shut down. My brother was around. That was fine, though. Probably actually a blessing. So I was really, really alone.
And how did you deal with that loneliness?
I was desperate for love. And I mean desperate. Because remember, I already had that belief that nobody liked me, nobody loved me. So that was already in the back of my mind. And then I lost my mom. And all these people aren't coming around. So I was desperate and I had to have a boyfriend. Because then that would show that I have value. If a boy comes along and likes me, well, then I've now got some value. And so I desperately looked for a boyfriend. I got one. Not good for me, but I got one. My choice in men were not good.
Okay, so with this, like, what are some of the things that affected your choice in men based on like your background and the trauma that you have gone through?
Well, and I don't think I've ever shared this on my podcast, and I've certainly never shared it with my ex. But I really, when my first husband and we were friends before we got together, but when he did begin to like me, it was amazing. I just jumped in with everything. I literally, this is terrible, but I literally believe this is the only man on the face of the earth that's going to love me. That is absolutely 100% what I believed. I believed he really loved me, and this was the only guy that I was going to ever be with, and he was the only man that would ever love me. So, I ignored some very red flags while we were dating, and we lived together before we got married. There were a lot of red flags there, and I ignored them because, hey, he was the only guy that was going to ever love me, so I had to hang on to him.
So this is really, really, really powerful example of how the beliefs that you have got from your like traumatic experiences, how you carried them to other life areas, really important areas, and that affects your like decisions and even like staying in relationship probably, if not definitely, longer than you should have.
Yeah. And then there's a Christian belief that kept me in the marriage. And I really did marry him with the intent of being with him the rest of my life. Absolutely.
So I'm thinking like what helps to, let's say if there's somebody in that situation where there are red flags, and but at the same time it's like this belief of there's only one person that's gonna love me, it's stronger than the red flags maybe.
Oh yeah.
how to how to know like what to listen to, or which voice is the right one, or like now you looking back to your situation, what would help you with where you are right now to navigate it like better, or make maybe like better decisions, or what was affecting your decisions like back then, because those are big decisions.
And the biggest decision was and I just lost it. It was right there. Give me a second. So repeat the question again.
So like what was it that was kind of affecting with you where you are right now, looking back at that situation, how would you navigate making those decisions, or what are some things that would affect those decisions with where you were?
You need to face reality first and foremost. And that's one thing I wasn't doing. I was seeing it, but I was pushing it aside, and I was dismissing that because I so badly did not want to be alone again. I so badly didn't want to be single. I didn't want to be alone and unloved. So I dismissed a lot of that and just set it aside. And so it's tough when you do finally face reality and you really look at it, and you look at the relationship, and you see whether that works for you or not. And if there's red flags, it's not the relationship that you should be in. But you've got a lot of things like trauma bonds and that kind of thing that, when it comes to trauma, that causes us to stay with someone that, obviously mistreats us.
Okay, so I'll challenge you here because it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
And with this, what would you Because I feel like a lot of times we kind of already know,
Yes.
but that fear or that belief of nobody loves me or that fear of being alone, which can be a terrible fear, it often feels like it's stronger or it can overtake us or our decisions.
Oh yeah.
So, what did you say to either yourself in the past going through something similar or to somebody who is going through something where that fear is seemingly bigger than some red flags, either in the person or some kind of life situation that they're in? What did you say to them?
Um, well, let me back up and say something that was coming to me. I think that might help, and then I can get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one thing that I finally got tired of is reliving cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle after pattern with him. I got tired of it. And I remember thinking when I started looking at the real reality of everything, what is it going to take for me to trust him again? And that was going to be, I didn't think he could come through. And so that was the final decision for me.
How did you get to that question?
How do you get to that question? Well, probably for a year to 2 years before we actually separated, I was getting really tired again of the patterns. That's when I was, so I stuck it out for another 2 years. And, things got so bad. And the thing is, he gave me time alone. And I learned that I could live without him. And I learned that I could live without those patterns, and I could live without the drama, and I could live without that. And so that was kind of the final straw for me. I wanted to keep trying to seek out peace.
So, here, do you have any suggestions on how to learn to live with yourself, especially with loneliness being one of the biggest fears?
Yeah, it took me a while to get that down because it was lonely. It got, and it actually triggered the abandonment stuff in me. I mean, there was a lot of triggers going on, and it's not like, oh, I got the divorce and I made great decisions, because I didn't. Turned around and jumped right into another relationship, because again, I was looking for that man that's gonna love me. So what was the question again? I know I'm going on a tangent. Sorry.
We were talking about. So what helps with that, like getting comfortable with that loneliness, or not
Okay.
loneliness, but like just being with yourself?
Being alone.
Yeah, being alone.
Yeah. So at that time, I was alone again. And although it was triggering me, it was also giving me time to start looking at myself and start working on myself. And it was painful. And
I was about to say, sounds painful.
it was very painful. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot of tears, some screaming, a few tantrums. Yeah. There was a lot of that. But it gave me time to stop focusing on him and begin focusing on me. And let me say this too about the marriage. He's not the bad guy in this thing. I'm not the bad person. We loved each other. It was not a good relationship for either one of us. So I don't want people thinking that I'm sitting here bashing my ex-husband.
Yeah,
I'm
being
not.
innocent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. I had just as much part in this as he did. So yeah. But
Especially with you having like a lot of trauma in your background as well.
yeah, and a lot of stuff that he did triggered me. And he wasn't trying to trigger me. It was just, that's the dynamic that was there. So, I kind of married my father. I really did. Yeah, I do recognize that. So, I started, spending that time doing self-improvement and looking within myself and getting into some more therapy, and learning more about me. And I don't know at what point it switched, but I'm no longer lonely. And I know we've talked about this before. I actually enjoy my alone time. I don't want to be alone all the time, but I embrace my alone time. and I'm no longer lonely. But it was a process, and a lot of it was building a relationship with myself, because I was abusing myself as well. I was very abusive to myself. Everybody abused Lisa, right? It's the way it felt.
Before we get into abusing, because I feel that's a important topic,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk a bit more on like the tantrums and emotions? Because I feel it's something that a lot of times when it comes to healing journeys, it's like, oh, I did the work on myself, and here I am on the other end. But a lot of times we want to skip through the details of that messiness and the
Yeah.
emotions and the tantrums and all the crying, shouting, everything that comes out or comes in package with that whole healing journey. Can you talk a bit more on that, and maybe in some ways maybe even like give some encouraging words to people who might be going through that right now? Because I feel like some people might feel like something is wrong with them, or they're not doing it right, or it's not this like super like rainbows and sunflower flowers kind of journey that they're going through, that everything is super enlightenment. So maybe talk a bit more on that.
Well, first I'll say that healing is like, I describe it as like spring cleaning. It's going to get real messy before it gets better. And that's true. And the healing journey can be very painful at times. I think one of the things that I know I struggled with a lot, and I hear a lot of trauma people say, is struggling with control. And it makes sense, because when we're young and we're being abused, it's out of our control, and we have no control over that whatsoever. So it's just feeling of, okay, well, as I'm an adult, I'm going to control everything. And I definitely took on that role. And I can remember the very moment when I realized that I had no control over anything other than myself. And I was literally screaming. I was so angry. And it was like the final frustration, because I had been trying to control stuff for so long. And it, like, the more I tried to control it, the more out of control it went. And I wasn't getting that. And it was the final straw. And I just remember literally standing in my living room and screaming. I was so angry and frustrated and just done. And when I got done screaming, actually, there was this sense of relief. And then I realized, oh, I don't have to control everything. And then I realized what a relief that was, and how exhausting it was for me all my life trying to control everything. And I did it to try to protect me. I didn't realize it, but it makes sense, right? But then once I got through my tantrum and I realized that I didn't have to control everything, that wasn't my responsibility, that all I had to focus on was controlling this. That was huge for me. That still affects me when I think about that moment. It's just like, I just take a deep breath. It's just, whew. That was
And those
really,
moments are needed, and they will happen, because your example is really good, because as painful as that experience was, it was a big relief at the same
mm-hmm,
time. So you
mm-hmm.
go through that pain, but then you realize that you don't have to be in control of everything. So that is that moment of relief. And it's kind of what you said about spring cleaning. You go through that, and that's just one moment. There's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of moments in the bigger picture of healing, but you go through that negative until you get to that, okay.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
actually isn't as bad as I would think. But within this moment, what shifted in your world, especially with the importance of control? And speaking on like trauma affecting different stages of life, how did that realization affect your future life?
It was a shift of, it was like I went from being overwhelmed because I'm trying to control everything to being able to be focused. And I was able to go, okay, I don't have to spend all my energy and time on all that other stuff. I can now focus on me. And that sounds selfish, but it's not. It's really important. And that is why my healing escalated, because it was at that moment. Because I was instead of spending the time working on myself, I was working on you. I was working on you. I was working on you. It was everybody else. And so it freed me from that and allowed me to work on myself. And so, and how that has affected me in the future and in my going forward is I pick my battles. I know what my battles are and what they aren't. And it's so clear to me now, where before, I would cross boundaries. I would offend people. I wouldn't mean to, and I wasn't, but I would tell everybody how they need to live their life. And, and now it's like, no, I pick my battles.
What were some of the things that you were trying to control?
Well, the biggest thing is I was trying to control and make everybody like me.
So other people's perception of you.
Correct. And then I was trying to change my husband too. So I spent a lot of time doing that too. Right. So that was a big project right there. Project I was never supposed to be on ever. But my focus always was, I gotta make sure that you like me. So there's manipulation in there, and there's not me not being authentic. It's I'm going to be the person I think that you want me to be so that you'll like me.
So you were pretty much like different person for every person.
I joke that I was a chameleon. And it wasn't that I was trying to be deceitful. That it's not it. And I wasn't doing that. It was just...
That's the only way you knew how to get love or to be
correct.
Liked. Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't even know me, and God forbid I show you me, you might not like me. And, so I got to be who I think you want me to be and who you like.
And I think there's also another layer to that, because then if they reject you, they reject that persona instead of the real you. So there's some kind of protection mechanism even within that you might be creating.
Right.
Even though the persona that you assumably have created should be rejected less, because it's kind of based on what... Interesting question here. How did you decide who to be for each person?
Well, those of us who have been abused, especially mine started very young, you become very hyper vigilant, right? That's the right word, right? Am I saying that word right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Well, very sensitive and paying attention to everybody and everything. Because I would literally walk in my front door, and before I would put a foot in, I would look around and assess the situation. So that's kind of how you kind of go into everything. And so I lost the question.
How did you know, like, who the chameleon effect?
Oh, yeah. So I would watch and I would listen and I would pay attention. And a lot of it was trial and error. What I would think, of course, I was probably wrong most of the time, because I mean, seriously, how can I figure out who I think you want me to be? I have to get inside of your head.
Yeah.
There's just so I'm sure I failed a lot. I think when I was successful is, I was able to, I guess, fool someone that I was that person. But I think that, it's not authentic. It's not authentic.
And when did that inauthenticity start?
Oh, I'm sure I learned that in my younger years.
Okay, so
yeah, I mean,
here maybe we can dissect a bit.
Okay.
So do you remember when you were authentic before you became inauthentic?
I do, as a kid. Yeah, I do. I do remember being, I do. And I was young. I was very young. And then I can remember being teased and ridiculed for being authentic.
Oh.
Yeah. By my brother. It started with my brother. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you were teased about?
Oh, everything. I mean, I couldn't even go to the bathroom. Everything. I was teased about my ears. I was teased about the way I looked. He picked on my looks a lot. And, I struggled with math in school, so I got teased about that. And my mom thought it was a good idea to try to have my brother tutor me, which was not good. So he, picked on me about everything. I told my husband this. I said, I'm weird about the bathroom because he used to scare me all the time. He used to do stuff to scare me. And we shared a bathroom, and I had to lock the bathroom door because I couldn't even take a bath without him doing something to scare the hell out of me all the time. And he'd always find ways. And so, even just that, I still have a weird thing about bathrooms. When I go in, I lock the door. It's just, it was always, I can honestly probably count on one hand the number of times he and I had a decent conversation where there wasn't any kind of stuff going on.
And at what age was it that he started teasing you?
As far back as I can remember. So I'm sure 4 or 5 years old, because he was 7 years older than me. And it's interesting because I remember when I was little, my parents showed me some 8mm film that they had taken of us when we were really little. And I'm probably 2 or 3 years old, running around in the backyard in my little bikini, and my brother's chasing me with a hose. And I remember looking at it the first time I saw it thinking, wow, we're playing together. Wow, interesting. My brother's playing with me. So as far back as I can remember, he had a problem with me.
And then with that comes the inauthenticity.
Right. Yep.
So that was the main thing that started it?
I think so, because I just couldn't be me, no matter what I said, and so when you get picked on enough, then you're like, okay, I got to figure this out, because I want to say something, and I don't want to get picked on. So how can I do this so that I can not get picked on? That's literally what I started thinking, I'm sure.
And I'm now trying to put together a timeline of how did that inauthenticity look like, or what are some of the things that triggered it, and how did it affected your life? Because authenticity is really a powerful thing, also in your self-image and the way you look at yourself and relationship with yourself, especially when you learn that, you can't be yourself.
Honestly, I don't remember ever, I feel like I really lost myself. And I've told this story, I think, before on the podcast. Like in 2016 is when I realized I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my identity. I didn't know who I was. And it's frightening. It was really frightening. And it hit me like I felt like I walked into a wall. It was the most bizarre thing. I didn't see it coming. And I had to go figure out who I am, which is my values, my standards, what I like, what I don't like, what's okay, And so I'm thinking back to when I was little, and I just remember always feeling like I had to make sure I was pleasing this person. I was, making them happy, that I wasn't offending them, they weren't going to abandon me. They weren't going to hate me.
Okay, so here's a question, again, something that you would say to the audience in case if there's somebody who's going through where they might be in a situation where they put everybody above themselves.
Yeah.
Including their authentic self and their wants, their needs, and all that kind of stuff. And naturally it is affecting them. They might not know how, but I know that for me that place was when you don't feel good. You don't feel good about yourself, or in general. What did you say to them?
Oh, because I'm trying to think of what did I do to begin to get out of that, right? I really, honestly started to begin to have a relationship with myself, which meant sitting down and really trying to figure out, it's not just the things that I like and I don't like, but what my values are, what's important to me. And I still and as I'm doing this, you're still going to have the voices in your head telling you, no, 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 no. Because the thing that I would get told is, oh, no, you can't do that. Oh, no, you can't do that. And I would say, why? And I wouldn't get an answer. And so part of it is I had to remove some people in my life that were holding me down. And that's hard because I loved these people very much, but they were holding me back. So that was one of the things that I had to do, which then gave me room to really focus on me. And I quit listening to what other people were telling me they thought I needed to do.
How do you do that? Because there a lot of times comes a lot of pressure. I think with that.
And there's a transition period where you make that decision, and then where it comes to the point where you can stand firm in it, and you have to stand your ground. And it's not that you have to push hard back on someone, but you do need to first you need to figure out what it is that's important to you, and then you have to set the boundaries around it. And some of the things that I started saying to people when the people that like to come over and tell you how to live your life and yet they aren't living their life accordingly is, I appreciate that. I got this. I got it. I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that you're telling me that and that you care. But I got this. And I don't hesitate now. And I don't have people in my life that just come up and tell me that anymore. They don't come up and tell me how they think I should live my life.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I had that all, and I did that. So I was guilty of that as well. In my unhealthy days, I was absolutely guilty of telling people how they should live their life, and my life was not in alignment.
Yeah. And also, like, two things that I want to add is with trying to figure out who you are, what you like, don't expect one clear answer straight away. Sometimes you might get that, but sometimes you just need to go out there and try different things,
Right.
or meet different kind of people, or do something different.
Right.
It's something that has helped me, and that's one of the reasons why I still kind of get to know myself, because I feel like the moment we get to the place where we get like kind of stagnant with where we are, or I feel the moment we think that we fully know ourselves, we stop to get to know ourselves, which is probably the most intriguing journey to be on, to get to know yourself.
Yeah, really, truly.
But then also with that, making decision that you know that is good for you, or you at least assume that it might be better for you, because you sometimes don't know initially if it is or isn't.
Yeah.
One thing that I would comment on is that don't expect to feel great, because you're gonna feel a lot of fear, but don't be surprised if you feel that. It doesn't mean that the decision is bad or wrong. It's just unfamiliar, and it's not something that you're used to or people around you are used to. So expect to have like reactions or comments or stuff like that, because it is different. And that's where, like, I know that for me that would be really powerful reminder or something to hear when I would make certain decisions, like early on, when you're not really sure if it's the right decision for you. Kind of think it is, but you don't know, when people around you are telling you like you're crazy or all this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's easier, or it seems so, to listen to others and be like, oh yeah, I'm crazy, I'm just gonna not do this.
Yeah.
But then you start to again step away from your authentic self. So in that exploration phase, when you start to make those decisions, just be okay with, well, you might not be okay with it actually. Just be aware that you're probably going to feel fear. You're probably going to question the decision did the whole time, but you can still go and act on it while you feel those emotions. They're allowed. It's okay. And it doesn't mean that you're now on the wrong path or that you now have to jump back. Because that's something that can make you question yourself.
And also one of the things that I began to do is, and this was helping me to learn how to trust myself, is I quit talking to people about things that I was going to do.
Yeah.
I just did. And I made a conscious effort, because I thought I got to learn to trust my decisions. In the beginning, there was the fear of, well, I'm just going to do it under the radar so nobody knows. And then if I fail, nobody will know. So there was that, right? So they started with that, and then over time, it just got to the point where I was learning to trust myself. And And so I just started doing stuff and not asking for opinions, but I would do it out in the open so people could see it. And if I failed, well, okay, that just wasn't the right direction, And I also learned to take steps and not just go make a decision and run with it.
Mm.
And that was because I was impulsive back in the day. I used to be impulsive and I'd make a decision, just run with it. And then it wasn't the right decision. And then the mess that you have to clean up when you do that. And so what I've also learned is, if it feels right, just take the first step and see and wait. You don't have to go rush out and do the whole thing. I mean, it's rare that that's the right decision to make. And that, because that kind of goes into the whole group of when I'm feeling overwhelmed, to stop looking at the entire big picture and just bring it down to just one step or a few steps so that it's manageable for me, so that I don't, because I'll get overwhelmed and I'm done. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I liked your comment on sharing it with others, because I know that for me,
Yeah.
there were stages with this. So initially, I would talk about stuff, but I would do nothing about it.
Yeah.
So it kind of like feed off of others' feedback of like, oh, you got this, or, like stuff like that. But I didn't believe myself. So I would just tell like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I would never actually do that. It was just my way of, but there was like a lot of shame around not doing it as well. Later, after I have said it and I'm not doing it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't know that. But then like I got to, and I feel like you're on a really good idea there, that the sharing piece, it's starting to change the more you build relationship and trust with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's not like you're doing something so that you're like telling others that like, oh, I'm doing this great thing because you care about what others think. It's like,
Right.
actually, I just feel like it's a thing that I want to do or that I should do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no really other reason than that. Like,
Right.
that's the reason. It just
Right.
came to me. It was my idea and I just feel like I want to do it.
Right.
But with that sharing with others, it also can be really powerful if you share with people who can either keep you accountable or maybe give some insights or maybe
Right.
give you some support.
Sharing it with safe people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And
And I didn't have safe people around me to begin with. So I think that's why I shut down on not sharing.
yeah. And with that, what would be your suggestions on making a decision? Do you share? Do you not share? Who do you share with? Who do you not share with? What are some of the things to look for? Because like who you share with, it can affect how it's gonna go with doing it.
Right.
Or not doing it.
Right. And so, and like I was saying, so when I first started doing this, I didn't have safe people around me. I wasn't safe, but I didn't have safe people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so as time went on and you're on your healing journey, you begin to know who's safe and who isn't. And even when you have the safe people, it's not like I go and share with everybody or don't share with everybody. It just depends on the situation. I now really trust myself way more than I ever did. But in the beginning, I didn't trust myself at all. I didn't trust anybody else and I didn't trust myself. And so it was something I had to build. And so it was trial and error for a little bit. But when I first decided that I was going to do it this way, that I wasn't going to share, it was again because I didn't have people. I shouldn't say they weren't safe. I shouldn't say it like that. I didn't feel that they were safe. And so I wanted to figure this out on my own. And so that's what I did. And once now I'm in relationships that I feel safe in, like even with you, and I share stuff with you. And you give me your opinion. Sometimes you don't, and it's okay. And I don't feel like where before, if I told you what I was going to do and you didn't agree with me, well, then I had to take your answer. That's how I thought.
Oh.
I couldn't counter it. It was like, oh, she said I shouldn't do it. So, okay, I guess I shouldn't do it. And that's where I started.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. Because that's another, what do you think is, or like, where would you see some of your trauma layering into getting to that place where somebody says something like, let's say you shouldn't be doing this, and you're like, okay, I guess this is not what I'm doing.
Well, and
Where literally, in some ways, you literally have no opinion.
and that's how I was raised.
Hmm.
That's how I was raised. You know, I wasn't the thing that I was taught. I wasn't taught things. I mean, I learned what to do and what not to do, but I wasn't taught. There was like this, I don't know, mindset that, well, you should have known. We should have known. And so I went into my adult life with, I should have known.
Yeah, and if somebody says you not to do something, then they must know better.
Right. 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 And I wasn't, you know, and again, and you know, times are different. I'm sure there were a lot of parents in the day, but you know, when I made a mistake, I got punished. I didn't get corrected. I just got punished. I didn't get corrected. I didn't get sat down. Okay, you know, you made this decision and this wasn't the right decision. Let's talk about it. You know, could have done this different, or even been proactive to teach me so that I wouldn't make that mistake.
Mm. So there's another topic that I wanted to touch on that I feel is really important to talk through, which is body image.
Oof.
Because you mentioned that you were teased about your looks, which that's kind of the first place where you started to kind of step away from your authenticity. Also, because you started to gain weight, no buying clothes, which also in that age is even like being out of shape or anything like that, that can affect how you see yourself and your like self perception. So can you talk more on like your relationship with food, your body image and stuff like that, and maybe where did it started to change or to shift, where you started to not like it, or in some situations it's even self-hate? Maybe talk a bit more on that.
So yeah, so I started emotionally eating when I look back on it when I was like 11 or 12 years old. I started definitely putting on weight at 12. So by 8th grade, I had weight on me. Didn't understand it at all, and I'm sure part of it was the eating, part of it was the hormones, you know. And I could just remember like we would get done eating dinner, and then I would just snack all night. I just ate all night. Like there's chips, cookies, whatever. My mom bought all this stuff. And so I just thought, oh, just eat it. But what's interesting is you're not hungry after you eat dinner. So
what made it start?
well, it was the abuse with my brother, I'm sure. But I don't remember any conscious, like, I do remember eating. And I do remember, well, my mom made a couple comments about it, but, and one family friend I remember made a comment about it, but other than that, nobody said anything other than my mom. But then in school, of course, we know how fun junior high is and being chubby. And then to make it even worse. So I had really long hair all my life. And by 8th grade, it was actually down like to my butt or even past my butt. And for some reason, my mom wanted my hair cut short. So first I went in to get it trimmed and it got cut to the middle of my back, which was fine. The next time I went in, she told the guy to cut it up to here. And I didn't know it. And so he made the first cut and it was too late. And I was devastated. The worst part is anybody that knows me knows how crazy my hair can be. I have really heavy, thick hair. And what happened is when you take that weight off, it literally just frizzed. So I'm in junior high. I'm emotionally eating. I've put weight on. My clothes are all tight because she won't buy me any more clothes. And then she makes me cut my hair. And I have no idea how to style my hair. I can remember that first day of school. All my friends were devastated that my hair was cut. My dad was furious. And they were like, oh my God, your hair. Oh my God, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And I ended up having some knee problems in that year too, which then I couldn't be quite as active because I was active. I was not that I sat around. I did not sit around during the day and eat. I was active. I was outside playing all the time, swimming. I was very, very active. So I had to wear this big cast on my leg for 4 weeks, and it kind of slowed me down a little bit. But when I got into high school, I think, part of it again was the hormones, and I'm sure they kind of started to settle down once I got into high school. And I got into marching band, which you're out there marching for hours and hours. Plus I was roller skating, again, really active. So the weight came off. And it was like, whoa, look at me. And I was getting attention. And that took me down a wrong direction. I was not promiscuous, but that's where the body image, I could see where, oh, I lose weight and all of a sudden I got this power. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I look back on it, it's like, wow, that's really powerful. For the first time in my life, I've got power.
So what happens when you get that power?
You mix that with, I've got to find somebody that loves me. It's you pick the first guy, and the first guy is not the right guy.
Or in that moment, it feels like it is.
Feels like it is, because there's somebody paying attention to me, somebody that likes me, And I've got, other people telling me. I even had other people telling me, he's not good for you. He's not a good guy. Oh, but he likes me. Nobody likes me.
So going through this, gaining weight, having bad experience with that, then losing it and having a lot of attention, how does it affect the way you see yourself or your value?
Well, it confirmed along with what my mom used to do. So when I was little, I had, long blonde hair. She loved dressing me up. So, Easter was a big deal. She loved dressing me up. We'd go out and go shopping, get the outfit. So I was taught at a young age about how to be really cute and so I take it into my teenage years. Once I lose that weight, it's powerful. And what does it make me think about myself? I didn't even really think about that when I think, I was just like, oh, okay, so I've got this now. So now I can go find someone to love me. I didn't think a lot about myself. When you're asking me these questions, I think back on it. There were moments that I thought about myself, but for the most part, I was out looking for something else. I wasn't looking within myself, because it was painful. It was painful to look within. And so I didn't. I was looking out.
But one way how you can think of it is because sometimes we can learn a lot through our behaviors. Yeah. So even if you didn't at that time think as much about yourself, there's certain things that your behaviors could have reflected about your beliefs about yourself or your thoughts about yourself.
Yeah.
So with that, my assumption would be that once you have lost weight, you get attention, you find somebody to love you, then what happens if you gain weight again? It's it's forbidden.
It is, and yet I did. Right? So I was able to maintain my weight throughout my teenage years and into my early 20s. I got married at 23, and I was able to maintain my weight for a little bit. And then it's funny, I was just telling my husband this story the other day that I probably was 25 and I put on a little bit of weight, and not a lot, a little bit to where my jeans wouldn't fit. And my jeans were already tight, so it didn't take much. And I remember putting on sweats and thinking, there was this moment of thinking, oh, okay, well, I guess this is when I start wearing sweats. And so I started wearing sweats. And my husband said to me, and bless his heart, he was never critical of my weight, and he watched my weight go up and down. And I will say, my ex-husband was really good about that. All he said was, "How come you're wearing sweats? Why aren't you wearing your jeans anymore?" And my thought was, well, isn't that what you do when you're 25? You just start wearing sweats. It was just so bizarre. So I was like, oh, okay, so I can still wear jeans. Okay. But then for the next 20 years, I battled with my weight. And so much of it, again, I've been active all my life. So it wasn't the lack of activity. It was eating in the evening and eating junk and not eating healthy dinners and punishing myself. And when I think back on it, that's exactly what my dad did. That is exactly what my dad did. His weight would fluctuate and fluctuate and fluctuate. And he would just gulp down food.
So you gave timeline of 20 years, which is not a short amount of time. It sounds, it's like, it's one thing to say about it, but it's another thing to live 20 years through that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, I battled with it 20 years. It's like, okay, nice. But like actually living it for like 20 years of your life, going through that, which is only like one aspect of what you have gone through. So how did that battle go? And what were some of the things that helped you to slowly start to shift things around?
Well, my weight fluctuated up and down. Dieting, dieting, trying all the different diets, drop the weight, put it back on, did that for years. It really started, what I really decided to, because I had all these rules about eating. Even though I was eating crappy, there was just all these weird rules that you put, like, well, I don't want to have broccoli because I can't put cheese sauce on it, but I can go eat a bag of chips. I mean, I mean, that's what I did. Right. And so, about 10 years ago, I just got tired of the dieting. I thought, it just doesn't work. You diet, you lose weight, then you put it, okay, what's the key? I wanted to find what that key was. And I finally realized that food isn't bad, and I decided then that if God created the food, it's good for me, first of all. And I'm not going to limit it. So like, I'm not going to stop eating fruit because it's got sugar in it. No, fruit is good for you. So I literally, and I'm still in this phase of rebuilding my relationship with food. And so one of the things I had to break was the habit of eating in the evening, because it turned into a habit. It absolutely became a habit. And so I have stopped that, but also not, I guess I'm allowed to have whatever I want. I can have what I want. I just can't have this much. You know what I mean? It's enjoying the food, but I'm enjoying the food rather than just gulping it down and just trying to fill a void. And I'm learning how to make really yummy, healthy food. And, if I slip up and I eat something I shouldn't, it's okay. I don't beat myself up anymore. Do I sit and eat a bag of chips? No, I don't do that anymore. Do I still emotionally eat sometimes? Yeah. Sometimes I just have a mood and I want to go eat, a bowl of chips, and I do. And I give myself grace. It was a long process. Yeah. Because I went from all these rules and structure that was not healthy, and a mindset of, to think that I would finish dinner and then munch in the evening when I'm not hungry at all. Just like at this point, I'm so aware of it that it makes me sick. But understanding that, I've taken the rules off the table. Now, I don't eat processed food and stuff like that, right? I stay away from a lot of processed food. But what I'm saying is I can't have that now, because that's, I had one person, this is one of the little key things that kind of stuck with me. I had someone say one time, if you want to be thin or healthy, watch a healthy person or a skinny person eat. And for some reason that just stuck with me. And I have observed that. And, you know, I have realized like I don't need as much food as I thought I did. This sounds crazy, and some people might think, well, yeah, but you know, this is just
Once you're in it,
you just don't
it's way
see it.
different.
You don't,
Mhm.
yeah, you just don't see it. You don't understand it. You don't see it. You know, when you come out of it, it's like, and I knew I had to build a new relationship with food because we need food. It's not like I can stop eating. And I was so tired of, you know, even going grocery shopping. Nope, can't have that. Nope, can't have that. Can't have that. You know, and I've got a few groceries in my cart. I just had to change my whole mindset about food and my understanding and my relationship with food.
And I think this is where emotional eating is one of the hardest addictions to
Yeah.
break, because it's not like, let's say, some kind of drug or alcohol. You
Right.
can't live without it. You
Right.
can't live without eating. You actually have to do it to survive. And that's where, and like when you buy groceries, you have to
Mm-hmm.
go to the store.
Mm-hmm.
And practically all stores, they have unhealthy options there as well. So you literally have to deal with daily temptation
Mm-hmm.
as you go through that transition phase, in dealing that. But one question that I had with this was, when it comes to even like the diets and everything that you went through, is there any link that, looking back, you could see between wanting to have control and the eating?
Yeah. So there was a diet I did, and I'm not going to name it on the podcast. There's a diet I did before I married Larry, and it was unhealthy, very restrictive diet. And I did it for 6 months, and I lost the weight, but I was miserable. I was miserable the entire time. The problem too was the calorie intake was so low that I couldn't even work out. So you just took away my number one stress reliever. I mean, I couldn't even walk because the calorie intake was so low, and I was hungry all the time, and I was shaky already. So if I did any kind of exercise, forget it. And I remember talking to my therapist. It was a newer therapist after I had done this, and she said, "Oh, so you just said, oh, fuck you, Lisa." And I was like, that's exactly what I did. And that's exactly what I did. And that was the final straw for me of doing any more diets. That was the final straw, because I thought when she said that, it took me back to when I decided to do this diet. And that's exactly what went through. I am going to lose this weight. And, you know, and that's exactly what I was thinking. And when she said that, it like hit. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. I am not doing any more diets. No more.
So with this, what would help to shift? Because I feel like a lot of times the energy behind is really, really important. So I know that for me, a lot of times it would be self-hate or not liking me or the way I looked, and all this kind of stuff, all the insecurities and the whole list. And a lot of times the energy behind certain decisions when it comes to food would be coming from like self-hate instead of like self-love.
Yeah.
Or if love is too strong, even like self-like.
Yeah.
So like in your journey, have you noticed that shift, and what has helped you to shift or like experience it more or go from one to the other?
Well, you know, one of the things that kind of helped me shift that is how I felt physically, you know, and I also had medical stuff with my back and everything. So to me, I just wanted to physically feel better. And so that was like the kind of the number one thing for me, is that is what helped me to shift, is I needed to physically feel better.
What helped you to remove emotional from that?
That's a really good question. I think what happened for the first time is the desire for me to feel good and take care of myself and be good to myself finally overrode that emotional draw to just eat and eat and eat. I
Do you
think that I
know?
had worked through enough of the trauma that I got to that point. So it's not like all of a sudden, I had been working on my trauma. And so I think that I had done enough healing that I got to that point where I'm like, okay, I got, because obviously this happened later on in my healing journey rather than earlier. And I think I got enough, I don't know, traction under me and feeling, getting a new relationship with myself that I finally went, gosh, I really do respect myself. I really, I do want to feel good. That was my number one thing, is feeling good and getting the physical part of it better. And I knew if I got that better, everything else would come in alignment.
And what were some of the emotions that you were trying to eat away?
Oh, the pain of not being loved, the loneliness I was feeling. Absolutely, the loneliness, the constant fear in me. I had so much fear in me all the time. Fear of abandonment, you name it. I was in survival mode. So all the behaviors that come with survival mode, you're just living from moment to moment. You don't have a lot of opportunities to forward think and be able to process stuff. You're just reacting.
And like the reason I'm asking this question is that, ironically, none of it really is about food. It's
Right.
it's about emotions and suppressing them. And you're giving a really good example with your life, really, that the more you work through your trauma or you address some of the underlying emotions or patterns and all this kind of stuff, the less you maybe felt that need to actually eat your emotions away, because you had
Yeah.
other tools or ways to
Mhm.
address them or work through them, or there was literally less and less to work through because you kept working through stuff. And
Yeah. Emotional eating
that's,
is a coping mechanism. It could be, it's almost like a form of addiction. It kind of,
oh yeah.
and so that was what I chose. I chose to binge eat. Other people choose alcohol or drugs or whatever. But it's a coping mechanism, and it's
But
the
I
way
feel
to.
like compared to other addictions, I don't think this is like not like less accepted. What's the opposite? Like it's not something that you're like judged for or whatever. Like I think it's not taken as seriously, maybe.
I think that's true. I don't, and yeah, because I mean, the other addictions,
It's like, oh, at least I'm not using drugs.
right? At least I'm not doing, drinking alcohol or,
Yeah.
but, and it's a silent one because you can do it in silence. Nobody will even know.
Yeah. And even like with emotions, one thing that I had identified within myself is the more I started to address and face shame,
Yeah,
the less I had that need of suppressing certain emotions.
true.
Because I feel like for me, the big one was shame.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And also another thing with eating is it's not like you can hide actually, like you can hide the process, but you can't hide the result
No, it's
because you're
gonna
getting
show.
weight.
Yeah. Yep. And
And
that's.
then you feel even worse and you eat even more because that's your coping mechanism.
Hmm.
And then you get even more out of shape and
Hmm.
there's even more shame. And it's like this endless cycle. And I think what I'm just thinking, what is it that can help to break that cycle? Because that cycle can be so steady. um,
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's looking in, one is like looking in the mirror and addressing or looking at those emotions and like facing them. For me, that one definitely helped. Like the shame was the biggest one.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
disempowering shame, which is like one of the quotes that you have on your socials that you said about that, like once you speak it out, it starts to lose its power.
Hmm. Yeah. Once it's spoken out or written out, even when you write it out, it just loses its power. I mean, I don't know if I've experienced it where something's been in my head and it just feels really big, and then I finally say it, and then I'm like, oh God, I was making such a big deal about that. It really doesn't sound that bad now that I say it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's so interesting. It's it's interesting how our brains work and how it can. Well, I have a ruminating brain. I have an overthinking, ruminating brain, and so I really have to. Now that I'm aware of that, I have to really manage it and catch myself because it just automatically goes there.
So, what is your relationship with food now, or even like body image?
You know, I do have to watch it because I'm still, you know, I still do the look in the mirror and can be critical of myself. But
Okay, question here: critical versus judgmental. Because I don't think it's bad to be
critical,
like critical, you
yeah,
know, because it's kind of like assessing. That's the fact. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. But
right,
then if you judge it, I think
yeah.
that's different.
Yeah, no, I'm not judging it. And what's interesting is, you know, I had a lot of back problems. I had a few back surgeries, a couple back surgeries over the last 5 years. And, you know, and it was a 5 year span of me not being able to work out much, which was really hard. So I lost a lot of strength. And so there's a reason why I'm saying this. So over the last year and a half, I've been able to like go back to the gym. I've been on my Peloton. I'm able to walk. I'm actually able to swim. Where last summer I tried to swim and I just sank. It was very frightening. So what that has done though is I'm actually really proud of myself, and I'm shocked at, you know, like I'll get on my Peloton and I'll think, oh, I don't know if I can do this one, and I'll do the half-hour spin class or whatever. I'm like, wow, I got through that. It was great, you know. And so that whole thing of, rather than being so judgmental against myself, I'm looking at the more positive, and I'm looking at, you know, where I was and where I am now, you know, and that I'm heading in the right direction. And my relationship with food is very different. Do I have a bag of chips in the kitchen? Yeah. But I don't sit and eat. Like, I can have that bag and it'll last me a week or whatever. You know, it's not something that lasts me
Yes,
two
it's like
nights.
super binging.
Yeah, I'm not super
Yeah.
binging. And so the thing that I'm learning too is I'm cooking different. I'm cooking with a lot of flavors. I'm not really paying attention to 100% the calories. But again, I'm having just a small dish of it rather than a big dish of it. And because it's got so much flavor, I don't need a big bowl. So it's really changing step by step my thinking about food. So I'm still in the middle of changing my relationship. I would say I'm probably more than halfway through. I'm pretty, you know, doing pretty good. But but that those thoughts will still be there, especially when I'm at the store. Oh no, I can't buy that because, and I'm like, do I want that? No, I don't want it, so that's okay. But the rule isn't, well, I can't have it because it's that. It's, no, do I want it or not?
Yeah, and sometimes like something that I started for, or sometimes I literally, as I look at, and for me this is so weird because before I wouldn't even think, I just grabbed the whatever is then healthy thing. But I have started, and it's becoming like more and more natural where I kind of walk by. I sometimes actually can grab the thing. I'm already walking back, and I'm like, I don't really think I actually want it.
I
Like,
know.
and I just go and put it back.
Yep.
But like, big part of it is also checking in with my body. It's like, do you actually want it? Like,
Yes.
and if I don't hear like, hell yeah, it's like, okay, maybe we just, but it takes time to kind of get your body less addicted from that
Right. And
because it is addicting.
that's a really good example of what people can do. You can start right there when you're at the grocery store. Pay attention to what you're putting in your cart and really ask yourself every single time you put something in your cart, do I really, really want this?
Yeah. Because you know what
Not if it's
happens
good or
is,
bad, not if it's a good food
yeah,
or a bad food. Start
because I
there.
think what happens is, in that impulse, when you feel like I so want this right now, when you get this like craving,
Yeah.
you sometimes you don't even care how far it is. You're gonna find a way to get there.
Oh yeah.
You get there, then you get it. And then I think it's important. So let's say as you're walking towards like buying it or whatever, to just stop, even like look in your cart and be like, okay, do I actually want it right now? You need to give yourself some time to kind of wind down a bit emotionally,
Correct.
because then when you feel that like craving, you don't really care. It's not
Correct.
even whether
You're
you
gonna
want it
get
or
it.
not want it. Yeah, you're just gonna get it. And sometimes like and I have done it like a few times now. Like I don't have my brother here right now, but when I was living where like I had my brother around, I would literally buy something and I'm like, do you want it? Because by the time I get back,
you've decided you don't want it.
Yeah, I have decided like I don't want it anymore. But like it's something that, or I'll just like put it in shelf or something. But it's a process to get to that place, because it's not like day one you now are like able to regulate yourself. Because there's like a lot of emotions, a lot of things that
Yeah.
Because like if you can't calm yourself down emotionally through that, like what else can you do? And
Right.
then you have to try out different things, which also is a process. It's not happening overnight, but it's something that like some of those, like, they seem simple things, but they can actually be really helpful. Just checking in with yourself, like, do I actually want it? And it's the same thing even after you have bought it and you eat that like pack of chips. Do I actually want another one? Or am I good for the day? And just doing it enough times, and well, I can say it, but like it's not as easy not to judge yourself.
I was just going to say,
or be
and
hard.
give yourself a lot of grace, and you're going to mess up, and it's okay. It's a process. It's, it's something that, for me, it was a coping mechanism. I started when I was 11, 12 years old and carried into my adult life. So I wasn't going to get through that overnight. That was going to, and I did a lot of it on my own because, I mean, it is kind of like an eating disorder. If you think about it, I'm actually going to find a good eating specialty disorder, I guess, eating disorder therapist. But yeah, I didn't get through it overnight. It wasn't, I woke up one morning and I felt like this. It was, it was really spending a lot of time with myself and asking those questions. Do I really want this? Is this really important? And giving myself grace of understanding that, look, this was a coping mechanism that I used to get me through a really tough time in my life. And I carried it in my adult life. I had many years of this habit. And so it's not going to end overnight. It's going to take time, and you really need to give yourself a lot of grace, because one of the things that was in my head that I heard months ago was I heard the abuser in my head. And I went and I did something. I don't remember what it was. I made a little mistake or something. I don't remember. And I remember, I can tell you exactly where I was at. I was walking out of our bathroom and I heard the voice in my head just berating me. And I stopped. I literally stopped in my tracks. And I literally even turned around. Like the voice, it felt like it was behind me. It was so weird. And I literally turned around and I said, "Oh, there you are. No, I'm not listening to you anymore." But it was just, and I remember thinking, just before I heard the voice, I was starting to feel like really crappy and just bad about myself. And then I heard the voice and it was so bizarre. And so you need to shut that voice down, because that voice is going to pop up a lot as you're trying to work through this and build a new relationship with yourself. And, if it's not right now, if you can't manage that right now, that's okay. Because again, I had to do a lot of healing before I got to the point of being able to really deal with my emotional eating. I'm not saying that's for everybody else, but that's just my experience. And it made it easier as I've done my healing and I've built a new relationship with myself. It's become easier for me to manage my eating, because I am much more aware of, I do want to feel good. I want to take care of myself. I want to feed my body and not stuff my body anymore.
Yeah. All right. So that's little insight into your background.
Yeah. A lot of
and
insight.
and your journey. So how do you feel about the next 100 episodes, or the next, or anything you want to say to the listeners?
Well, we do have some exciting stuff coming up, but I'm excited about the next 100 episodes because, again, there's 3 pillars to my to my podcast, right? So it's giving people a voice to tell their story, bringing on the experts, and bringing awareness. And I just love that so many people are willing to come on and share their story, because it isn't easy. And it does take a lot of bravery. And I've been the one thing that's really cool about the first 100 episodes is I've had such diverse people. I've had men on, and I love that. I keep saying love, love, love. I'm going to stop saying love, love, love. That's something I'm going to stop. But it's so wonderful that people are stepping up and sharing their stories and being brave and helping others. So that's been really exciting. But going forward, should I talk about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what's coming up is I am recreating the workshop that I did years ago that I've talked about on the podcast for women. And the idea is I'm kicking it off in January, and it's called the Women's Childhood Abuse Healing Workshop. And more details will be coming, but it is an 8-week private, secure, safe group. We keep the group small, but it's intense, and you're going to do a lot of healing in it. And then what's really cool is there's a lot of support while you're in the workshop and after. So it's not like you go through the workshop and okay, good job, see ya. We're building a community, so I'm really excited about that, and just be looking for more information coming out soon. We're working on it now, but yeah, it's coming out, and I'm so excited about it, and I know it's going to make a difference. I know it is.
Yeah, it will. It will. All right. Well, I guess I'll see you next time then.
Yeah. Thank you. You
Stepping into the second 100.
I know, right? Here we go.